Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee Talk with immigration attorney Brian D. Lerner. In this particular episode, I'd like to talk a little bit about a possible asylum that a lot of people are having to apply for and what some of the issues are. Now, as many of you know, the asylum is when someone is being persecuted for some reason in their home country and then they try to seek refuge in the US. Just as a side note, there have been many cases apparently since Trump took office where ICE officials are illegally and unlawfully returning people to their home countries once they come into the United States in order to apply for asylum without giving them the opportunity to do a credible fear interview with an asylum official. So there's going to be lots of litigation on this, and we'll go forward. It's unfortunate that something like this is happening, especially when the laws on the books allow people to apply for asylum. But we have to fight each step of the way in order such that the application of those laws is not bypassed by ICE agents who think that they are following orders from Trump. So, given that, one of the categories of asylum is referred to as gender based asylum. And there's different categories of gender based asylum, but the gender based asylum, again, that really has nothing to do with political asylum, but it is one area of asylum that you would be able to come into the United States and apply for. Now, first, you have to define the social group. And the social group, they have a word called immutability. Okay. That's where a person cannot change uh, from the social group, or it is so fundamental as to being in that social group that they should not have to change. So that may be a lot of legal gobbledygook for you, but that's what I do is I try to look at the situation and to define what is the social group that forms the basis of the gender-based asylum. So that's the first thing to be done. Now, there's issues as to whether or not, for example, let's say there's domestic violence. And let's say that the person who committed domestic violence against you, which for the most part would be the male, let's say that you are not married. Now, if you're not married, the issue is whether or not you can apply for gender based asylum. So that all depends. It depends on defining the social group, perhaps common law, people in common law marriages who are suffering domestic violence where the government is unwilling to help. And that's a big issue here. There might even be laws against domestic violence, but that's not the real issue when applying for gender based asylum. You have to show that the government is unwilling or unable to enforce the laws or to enforce anything against the person who's committing the domestic violence. In many countries, the husband can beat the wife to a pulp, and the police will say, well, sorry, this is a domestic affair. There's nothing we can do. So, of course, that would need to be proven in some manner in order to gain asylum in the United States. So you also have to show the government that there's nowhere to hide in your country. So, for example, if you're in the southern part of the country, immigration or the trial attorneys might say, well, just go to the northern part of the country and we'll go from there. So, given that, you have to show again, realistically, there's nowhere to hide, and there's ways of showing that. I mean, you might be listening to this and say, well, there's no way I can show that. I can go hide out in some farm 100 miles from here and they'll never find me. But that's not required to meet this criteria. Now, if these are individuals that are committing the domestic violence on you, try to show that they will follow you wherever you go. okay, and they'll continue committing the domestic violence. Show that you have, for example, loss of property, loss of livelihood, that you just had to pick up and go because you were afraid of being beaten again and or killed. And there's all kinds of ways, again, of showing that through testimony and other manners. Show that the persecutor, the person that's committing the violence on you, has a broader reach than just the local place where you are. Okay, many countries have little villages, and they are able to, uh, you know, at least the government will argue, well, this is a little village A in the middle of nowhere. There's no way that they would have a reach that goes farther than that, and they being the persecutor. But there's ways of showing that. Show that there's possible social groups might be forced relationships, okay, or forced marriages. And we're not talking about pre-arranged marriages. We're talking about forced marriages where it's not prearranged and you didn't want to do it and you were forced to do it either at gunpoint or some other manner. Um, Whatever you find, you must show that there is a link between your gender based asylum and the persecution. Show that nexus. There's also, just for your information, female genital mutilation. A lot of countries in Africa do that, and that is a gender based asylum. There's transsexuals in different countries who conceal and hide their identity, and that also can show. So while this video doesn't give you a obviously complete how to do it on gender-based asylum, it does show some of the issues, and it does show that there are lots of issues and that it's possible to do. So if you like the video, click like, subscribe, go ahead and send me a message, if you have questions, and also I offer free consultation to let you know what can be done and so forth. So more on the coming videos. Thank you.